Venice, the Floating City, Chapter 3, Art and Culture. Chapter 3, Art and Culture. American writer Truman Capote once compared Venice to eating a whole box of chocolate at once. Delicious, of course, but what could those chocolates be? Architecture, painting, music, or theatre? Museums or street parties. In Venice, there are so many choices. Venetian architecture is unusual because the city did a lot of trade with the East. Many of the buildings in Venice are a mix of European and Eastern styles, and some of them date back to the 14th century. One of the most famous buildings is the Doge's Palace in St. Mark's Square. The palace is built mainly on the Gothic style, but with many parts in an Eastern style as well. It used to be home to the civic leaders of Venice, but today the Doge's Palace is a museum. Although during the 18th century Venice was losing its power as trading port, it was quickly becoming an important center of fashion. The Venetians loved to decorate the insides of their palaces with great care and attention. Furniture was made by hand and decorated with wooden flowers and angels. There were so many mirrors decorated with gold and silver. Colorful pictures were painted on the walls and the ceilings. Beautiful things were brought from foreign countries to make even the simplest house seem like a king's palace. Venice has always been a city of arts. During the Renaissance, it had its own school of painting. Artists like Bellini and Vivarini were interested in the relationship between color and light. Painters of that period made oil paint popular because it lasted a long time in the wet lagoon area. The use of these materials in the wet Venetian climate helped create a new style full of rich colors. Tintoretto was one of the most famous Venetian painters of this period. His painting's Paradise, which is one of the largest paintings of its kind, is an example of this style of art. Wood, stone, glass were also used to make many wonderful things. In fact, by the 12th century, glassmaking was one of the most important businesses in Venice. In the 13th century, glassmakers were told to move from the city center to another island called Murano. There were two possible reasons for this. Firstly, civic leaders said they were afraid of that fire from the glass factories could destroy the wooden buildings of the city. Secondly, it was glass that was made on island. Nobody could find out the secret of how to make it. Many people believe that the second reason was more important. In fact, some years later, glassmakers were not allowed to leave the island at all. Today, Murano glass is still famous. You can visit the island and see how it is made. Venice is also a musical city. During the Renaissance, musicians traveled from all over Europe to study there. It was one of the first cities to start printing music as well. Venice's most famous composer is probably Antonio Vivaldi. He spent almost 40 years working on his music at the Church of Santa Maria della Pieta. This church was home to many poor young girls who had no families. Vivaldi taught them to sing and play the musical instruments. Some of the musical instruments he bought for them are still on display in the church today. You can also find Venice in many different works of art. Shakespeare's plays Othello and The Merchant of Venice take place there. And with its spectacular beauty, it's no surprise that Venice is the star of many movies too. February is a carnival time, and during Carnival, Venice is one big party. Carnival first began at the end of 13th century as a religious celebration. 40 days before Easter, people stopped eating meat. Carnival means goodbye to meat. Before beginning 40 days without meat, the people of Venice organized meat-eating festival. They dressed in colorful costumes and hid their faces behind the masks. Today, many people still wear costumes and cover their faces, and Venetian masks are famous all over the world.